Thank you actually for agreeing to have this conversation with me. I'm so happy because for me you are like a both friend and student,
Oh,
and now having you as a teacher is such an honor. Thank
trifecta, all three. No, it's my pleasure. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, yes. So I would like to talk to you today about teaching because I know that you are one of like the best teachers on the
I'll pay
platform.
you later.
Okay, okay, yes, yes, please.
The money's in the post.
Oh, cool. But yeah, but for me, you are also because I think that in order for us to be good teachers, we have to be exceptional learners. And you speak and study. Your whole life has been about languages, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I was raised bilingual, English Italian. My mother's Italian, my dad's English. And so from a very young age, I was around two languages spoken at native level. And then I think that just sparked my interest in languages in general. So when I went to university, I studied translation and interpreting in French, Spanish, and I also studied German at school. And in my mid-20s, I started studying Portuguese. So yeah, languages have always been a part of my life on a daily basis. So yeah.
Amazing, amazing. And now you're studying Swedish?
I started doing a few Swedish lessons. I've had to drop it temporarily just because of my workload. This summer has been crazy, especially with all the online work. But I do want to pick it up again. I'm fascinated by Scandinavian culture. To be honest, if somebody would pay me to learn a new language every week, month, year, I would gladly take that money. It would be amazing. But unfortunately, time is an issue. There aren't enough hours in the day to do everything that I would like to do.
But now I'm curious. So you would learn any language? Is that a language that you're not interested in? Because for me, for example, there are languages that they seem so difficult, or
Mm-hmm.
languages that I do not like how they sound. For you,
Right.
I know you like accents and sounds.
Yeah.
So you would learn any language, or is there?
No, that's a great question. I probably would, given the opportunity, learn any language. However, I do have languages I'm more interested than others, and I think this is probably the first tip I could give in terms of learning a language. It's you need to be able to connect with the culture in order to fully embrace a language and pursue it beyond the initial, oh, I'm excited and want to learn a language. So if you don't have an interest in that culture, in the people, in society, then your learning is going to be limited. So to give you an example, I'm extremely passionate about Spanish, but not just Spanish as a language, Spanish as a culture. So that has allowed me to reach a level that I think is only accessible when you are willing to embrace it fully, not just from a linguistic perspective. So, for example, growing up at university, I had to choose whether to study Russian or not. And at the time, I thought to myself, what's the point? I don't have any Russian friends. It looks like a cold country to me. Therefore, I'm not going to study Russian. Now I work with so many Russians, and I actually have developed a genuine interest in learning their language because they're not cold people. It's not a cold country. They're phenomenal people. And now I want to learn it because I've bought into the culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because otherwise you're going to be interested for the first week, month, etc., and then it's just going to peter out. You're not going to want to keep it up. So
Peter out?
yeah, to peter out, to kind of fade away. You're not going to maintain that level of enthusiasm and consistency in your practice and in your work. So yeah.
That's such an interesting answer. Yes, I think you're right. You are right. As a teacher, as a Portuguese teacher myself, I noticed that the students who are more immersed in Brazilian culture, they not only learn faster, but
Mm-hmm.
they I think they can reach levels of depths
Yeah, depth.
that
Yeah.
depths and that others can't because they can really connect. And I do have some students who, even though they live in Brazil, they
Mm-hmm.
manage, can I say they manage to live their lives as English speakers. They do
Mm-hmm.
not connect And you would think that because they are here, they would like.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of people don't have an interest necessarily in learning the language, particularly, I don't want to generalize excessively, but I come from a British and an Italian background. So I see a stark difference in the approach to language learning. My English side of the family has come to visit us in Italy, where I grew up. They've come to visit us many times over the years, and they don't even know how to order a beer in Italian because they've had no need. And they've had no need, but they've also had no interest. And so I think then in reverse, my Italian side of the family has learned English so that they can communicate with the English side of the family. So I think that native English speakers have less of an interest, also because they see there's less of a need to learn the language. But it's a shame because they're missing out on a whole different world. I think the limits of our language are actually the limits of our world. And the more languages you speak, the more worlds are made accessible to you, because the way we process information as a Spanish speaker, as an Italian speaker, as a Portuguese speaker, it's different. The words we use, the expressions we use, it's totally different. So I always feel a little sorry for people who don't try. You don't have to become a C2 level expert in a language in order to embrace the culture. But I think a lot of people see the task as being too daunting, and so they just give up. And then understandably, they say, what's the point? People will want to talk to me in English anyway. That's how I felt about Dutch. I love Dutch, the Dutch language and the Dutch culture, but I've never gone past B1 because the Dutch are so good at English. And anytime I try and say something in Dutch, they'll just answer in English and I'll be like, what's the point? That is really hard you have to be very motivated, especially as an English speaker, to learn a foreign language, because it's just so easy to not make an effort. Yeah.
But do you think that for teachers, it is an effort that is necessary? Do you think that a teacher must have the experience, how can I ask? A teacher
must
to
have the experience of learning
a language. A teacher, foreign teachers? How can I ask that? Help me.
Yeah. So does a teacher need to have experience of learning a foreign language in order to be a good teacher? That's what you're asking?
Yes. Precisely. Yeah.
I know that there's people who would disagree with this, but I think that in order to be a well-rounded teacher and to fully understand your students, you have to have been in a position of learning something, preferably a language, because it gives you a deeper understanding of the struggles. It allows you to be more, I think, empathetic towards students. And I think, seeing as we're talking about teaching, I think that teaching is much more than just knowing your grammar. I think that from a technical perspective, I think I'm good. I don't think I'm great. But I think what makes me and you and many other teachers really good is that ability to connect. And I think you can only connect when you've been in that person's shoes or a similar experience. You've had a similar experience to them. And I think being a learner has definitely allowed me to say, hey, I know what you're going through. I know that from B1 to B2, there's a massive jump and you feel like you've plateaued and you feel like you're there forever, but don't worry, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We'll get there together. I think if you've not had the experience of going through the motions as a language learner, you can be a good teacher, but your experience as a teacher will be limited, I feel. But that's my perspective and my experience, which is the experience of one person.
No, but I totally agree with you. I totally agree. Do you think also that being a learner, it's part of what, actually, I have two different questions. It feels like I'm interviewing you, right?
Yeah.
Well.
Is this how all your YouTube things go?
No.
No, it's more flowy. Do you want me? I don't know.
No. It's because I'm so curious about you, so it's a good way.
Okay.
Actually, I did have a conversation with on smoking. So I had a counselor. A counselor? Do you say counselor? She would help people,
Counselor?
a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
She would help people quit smoking. So in that conversation, I was so curious about her experience. I was sharing because my father, he's a smoker.
Yeah.
So I was sharing, but also she was telling amazing stories. So I was like, I was making questions, asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, since you have such an interesting background and story, I'm so curious. So I wanted to ask you if you think that okay, so the question is, how can we as teachers, if you think that's our responsibilities as teachers, to make our students engage? Because sometimes as a teacher, I will have students who are, how can I say, monosyllabic. They'll be monosyllabic, or they will be learning, let's say, for the wrong reasons. I'm learning because my partner is Brazilian, but I really do not want to learn. Maybe they do not want to learn. They just learning out of obligation. And or sometimes, as you said, they will reach like this B1. There is, how did you say, a big jump?
Yeah, there's a big jump between B1 and B2, right? Because progress from A1 to A2, if you're really motivated, you can even do it in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like I have a student at the moment, he's learning Italian with me. He's phenomenal. He's gone from A1 to B2 in the space of 5 months. Granted, he's a university student and he's the most motivated person I've ever met. He has a schedule. He sends me his daily schedule from Monday to Friday. He factors in 5 hours of Italian every single day. So
wow.
He's making this progress because he's putting in the hours. But A1 to A2 can be relatively short. A1 to A2 to B1 can be relatively short, but then between B1 and B2, that's where the frustration begins, because the gap is very, very wide. And that's where we're at, me and the student at the moment. And he's seeing that there's so much, and he's like, but why is it not, why am I not improving? And sometimes he'll say, I feel like I haven't made any improvement over the last 6 weeks. Because it's harder to notice things when the gap is wider, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So sorry, go back to your question.
No. Well, yeah, that's so good explanation. So the question is, how do you make the students engage, even though they might not be motivated for various reasons? It could be a lot of reasons. Do you think it is our role as a teacher to motivate and to make our students engage, or do they play a part in it as well? How do you manage students who are not that motivated?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. The first thing I will say is that I think we do play a role in motivating students, and this is my mantra. If I don't believe in what I'm doing, and if I'm not bringing the energy to the table, why should you care? So that's my principle. So I go to every lesson, whether I'm having a bad day, a good day, I go with tons of energy and enthusiasm, because if I'm not enthusiastic about what I'm doing, you're not going to be enthusiastic, and it's not going to rub off on you. You're not going to get that energy and rub off on you. My energy is not going to impact on you. It's not going to have an effect. It's not going to rub off on you. So I think that this is key. And if I think as a student on Italki as well, if I think of the lessons I've taken, and not just on Italki, but also offline, the teachers that I have stopped following or doing lessons with are the ones who didn't bring energy to the table, are the ones who were not engaged, who were not present, who were clearly not passionate about what they were doing. So yes, I do feel that we have to bring energy and enthusiasm. This being said, every student is different, and every student comes to the table with different motivation. It's going to be very different teaching someone who is paying with their own money because they really want to learn about the culture and the language, and they are booking of their own volition 2 or 3 lessons a week, compared to a student whose parents are paying for him, who has to do it because he has to get the B2, otherwise he's going to have to sit extra exams at university and he doesn't want to, and has no desire to be in that space with you. So the students' motivation and interaction also plays an important part. And there's only so much you can do. You can do a lot as a teacher, but there also comes a point where it's very personal, right? And it's very dependent on the individual. However, when you were talking about monosyllabic students, I think it's important to gauge who's in front of you, and it's important to read a room. Okay, the expression is to read a room. So if that person is monosyllabic because they're shy, with my enthusiasm, with my empathy, I can work around that and get them to come out of their shell. If they're monosyllabic because they have no grammar and they're asking me to do conversation when they're an A1, that's where I will step in with my teacher hat and say, listen, you can't run before you can crawl, right? You can't even walk, let alone crawl, let alone run. So we need to be able to build. And if they're willing to go on that journey with me, great. If not, there are so many other teachers out there. I'm not the one for you. I think what I've enjoyed so much about, we can talk about italki as well, right? We can mention.
Of course.
What I've enjoyed about italki compared to the classic brick and mortar school where you're given a class and that's the class and you have to deal with it, is it's given me the agency to say, this is a student I want to work with. This is someone who I think I can help. Therefore, I will continue working with them. You're not afforded that luxury in a brick and mortar school where you're given a class and you just have to deal with it. So you have 15 students, they're teenagers, their parents are paying for them, 5 are motivated, 10 just want to go out and party, you deal with it. So I think the question is a very difficult one to answer, and my answer, like to most things in life, is it depends. So yeah, it depends.
Yeah, so I like that you mentioned that about teaching in a classroom, because before italki, would you only teach in a classroom, or you had experience teaching online before?
No, I think I did like a handful of online lessons before italki just to help people out because they begged me, but I didn't want to do it. Yeah, no, because having moved around a lot, I now live in Canada. This is the 6th country that I've lived in. You pick up students along the way and they want to stay with you and you want to keep that relationship going. So I did a few lessons, but predominantly my work was face-to-face. And then COVID hit, and like most people, I had to, like all people really, I had to pivot. I had to find a way to make a living with my profession or another profession, I don't know, but I thought, okay, the best thing to do is try and go online. And so initially I was hesitant because I didn't want to. I already spend a lot of time in front of my computer every day because I translate all the time. And the reason I was teaching face-to-face is because I enjoyed the balance of 4 hours of translating, 4 hours of teaching. So 4 hours alone reflecting, 4 hours of interacting with other humans and actually seeing people. But then with COVID, the options were limited. And so that's why I started teaching online. It's a whole different kettle of fish. It's totally different to teaching face-to-face. I think both have their pros and their cons.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that because a lot of teachers, because COVID hit it. Can I say that?
Hit us, or just hit.
COVID hit, and a lot of teachers like yourself had this transition from teaching face-to-face to teaching online. So I wanted to ask you, so if there is a difference, obviously it is totally different, I guess, because I on the contrary, I always have taught online. I do not have experience teaching outside of a online platform, and I would love to, but you had the both. So I mean, what are the differences, if you could name some? And do you have tips for teachers who are so afraid of doing it? Because I talk sometimes to my students, and they are teachers, they teach offline, but they think it is so different. It is a new world. Like, what would you say to people who are afraid of taking that step? Was it difficult for you when it happened?
No, it wasn't difficult because of my experience and background. So I'm a teacher trainer. I'm a CELTA teacher trainer, and so I teach teachers how to teach in the real world. So hopefully my skills are decent enough to be able to transition. So I think I did it okay. I actually, to be honest, I thrived. I really enjoy learning new things. So the minute the opportunity presented itself. Although I didn't want to necessarily teach online, I was excited to learn the technology. But yes, so in response to your question, there are lots of similarities and lots of differences, and lots of pros and lots of cons. So first I'll talk about face-to-face. What I miss enormously about face-to-face is the sense of community. So there's something that technology will never be able to replace, and it's that human touch. And of course, now we have video conferences, and we can create communities via forums and so on. But that walking into a classroom and being like, oh, Maria's clearly had a bad night. Oh, she looks really happy today. Like, just being able to look around and see people and connect with people. I don't think there's anything better than that. And I miss that a lot. Also because I teach big groups. I teach groups of up to 20 students at a time on my training courses. And I see their faces, but I don't have the chance to hop over and speak to them and be like, hey, how are you? I mean, I can take them to a breakout room in Zoom and do that, but it's different because it's harder to read faces alone than reading body language. And sometimes maybe online people look as if they're present, but they're actually not. They're there with their phones underneath, you know, and that's something I miss in a sense, being able to see how people are on a human level, because it's not just about the teaching, it's about creating a connection. It's about, especially with languages, I don't think people come to you or to a teacher specifically for the language now. They come for an experience. So they want to not only learn the language, but have a good time. And especially people who travel here to Canada and come to our classes, they are not just coming for the in-class experience, they want to learn about the city or learn about their teachers. So that element is missing. In terms of the difficulties of teaching face-to-face, obviously if you have stage fright, that will take a little stage fright. So when you're afraid of getting up on stage and talking in front of many people, I think that it's slightly more daunting face-to-face, but that's debatable though, and I think people would disagree with me on that. But I think it can be slightly more daunting because you're physically there, and I don't know. I feel that with technology, there's kind of a barrier that, so if something's going really bad, you can just like close the call and be like, oh, sorry, technical glitch. But you can't really do that face to face.
No.
But in terms of the teaching quality, I think the quality is identical. I haven't seen a difference in the way that I teach in terms of the quality of my teaching. However, what I really appreciate about the online setting is that all of my files and folders are so much more tidier than in a real life setting, because in real life you're having to scramble for photocopies and get pencils and pens and all that. You have to think of all these things. And now online, everything is really neat for me. So I feel that I've managed to streamline my work, organize my content, organize things in a way that I couldn't, and it's all in one place. And I couldn't really do that as much in a face-to-face setting. One detractor, and one thing, if you have colleagues who are looking to teach online for the first time, one thing that I have noticed is that your ability to manage technology is far more important in an online setting than in a classroom setting. And it's a shame really, because what I've noticed, especially on the CELTA courses where I've been training, students will often be fooled by teachers' ability to use technology. So you might have someone who is really good with the tech, and the students then think that teacher is good because they know how to manage the tech, but then their actual language knowledge isn't as good. And then you have teachers whose language knowledge is really good, but their tech is a little on the weak side, and they might mess up the breakout rooms, or they might accidentally close a call. And that has so much more of an impact on the student's perception of a class than it does in real life. Because in real life, it's more about the content than all the glitz and all the, the sparkly technology things. Those are additional. Whilst in the online setting, those are essential. So it's frustrating when you try and go to Zoom or Skype or Italki Classroom and the technology doesn't work and it's eating into your time, your teaching time. It's annoying for everyone. So that's something I've noticed. But definitely the key difference is rapport. Teaching techniques can be very similar. You might be more comfortable online because you can organize things, and that's why I am more comfortable online now. But in terms of the actual rapport, that's the main difference, I'd say.
I have more questions.
Go for it.
The more I listen to you talking, the questions comes up. So
right.
Do you think that lessons online are suitable for everyone, both teachers and students? And also, if you think that it is easier, or how do you know that your students are actually learning if it is the same online and offline? If it is the process of like having a grip, knowing if okay, so maybe it's not making sense. So
Okay.
the first question, do you think online lessons is suitable for both students and teachers? Everyone could learn or teach online? And is it different to know if your student it's actually learning in both ways, if you're teaching in a classroom or italki? If it is the same to, or how do you know that your student the way you know that your student is actually learning is the same both ways? Does it make sense?
Yeah. So in terms of can teachers and students benefit from working online? Absolutely, 100%. I think the advantage for students is that flexibility. So they don't have to, well, both students and teachers don't have to go to a physical space. So the teachers don't have to commute, which is time and money. The students can revise lessons, revise content, have the notes available to them almost immediately, depending on your setup. But for example, the way I know how you and I teach, and we always share, and I think it's a great technique to have the Google presentation or a Google Doc open, shared with the students. So at the end of the lesson, you're not having to write extra notes. The student's not having to take extra notes. It's all there. Although I encourage note-taking as a technique for students because there's a connection between the brain and the hand. And so students should always be trying to take notes as well, or after the lesson, taking the notes that we've written for them and rewriting them. So I'm advocating writing. I think it's so important for students for the learning process. However, I think the fact that we can share that document with them and at the end of the lesson that's ready for them is a great tool that you don't have in face-to-face lessons, because you can't manage a classroom and also write notes for people at the same time, okay, because you're not in front of a screen. So I think it's extremely beneficial for both students and teachers, massive advantages. Especially I work with a lot of Russian students, and they are mothers, they are workers, they do so many things. And so being able to even just put the kids to bed and then come and join the lesson, what a luxury. You can't do that in face-to-face setting, because you have to kind of like manage your entire day around that lesson and be like, okay, now I'm going to leave the kids and now I'm going to take the car and go to the school. So definitely it's advantageous for both students and teachers alike. And then in terms of the techniques for checking that students are learning, again, I think these are identical for online and face-to-face scenarios. And it's interesting because it's something I don't see a lot of teachers do. And yeah, I'll touch upon this. I'll go there. So I see a lot of teachers, and we've talked about this in the past, complain about student retention, not being able to keep their students, about not having enough students. And I think that is not the market, it's your teaching. So I know that our student retention is high. And as I said before, I don't think it's because we're technically the most amazing teachers on the planet. I'm really not. But I keep students' motivation going. How? By doing progress tests every 3 or 4 weeks. And by progress test doesn't mean let's sit down and do an exam. It means that after a certain amount of time, we're going to look back on what we've done and we're going to see that progress. Because people need milestones to keep the motivation going. It's very easy to lose interest if you don't see how you are improving. And that's where you as a teacher are useful, because in reality, many of the things that we do in the classroom, students could grab a book or watch a YouTube video and do it themselves. So you have to think, where is my added value? What am I bringing to the table that they cannot get from a book or from self-study? And I think because both you and I'm speaking of you and I because I know how you teach and I know how I teach, but many other people also. But you and I bridge that gap by filling it in with what's missing. And what's missing is that continuity, that identifying the progress, that praising. Praising is so important. Even like making people feel special and making them feel they've achieved something, even if it's a small achievement, right? It's important because not everyone learns at the same pace, and people need to be praised for even the baby steps that they take. Okay, and so praising, giving mini progress tests, which can be formal or they can be informal. It doesn't have to be sit down, do an exam, but it can even be, here, let's do a Kahoot or a Quizlet that I have created for you based on what we've done over the last 4 weeks, right? And it doesn't have to be every single week, because being tested every week is tiring as well. But there has to be a point where you stop and you say, look how far we've come to date. And that's how you retain students, because then they'll also think, oh, this teacher is actually interested in my journey. I'm not just a number to them. I'm not just an hour of work or X amount of dollars. They're investing in my learning process. And I think that is key. And that can be achieved in a physical classroom and in an online setting. That is more to do with the teacher. And in summer, I work as a director of studies. I've done it for 4 years, both director of studies and assistant director of studies. So I have to employ teachers on summer courses. And so I get to see the range of teachers that are out there, and the ones that get the best feedback from students are the ones who genuinely cared about the students and showed them that they were making progress. So that's my response to that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. Wow, Ashley, I think I'm learning so much from this, let's call interview. And I think,
okay.
and
interrogation.
And I do what, and when, as I was listening to you, I was just thinking, wow, there are a lot of teachers that I would like to hear this, because I am a student as well. And what I look for when I'm looking for a teacher is actually this component. Like, I want someone who cares about me as an individual and my learning. And because, yes, as you said, especially people like you who has learned tons of languages, you do not need a Swedish teacher that much. Well, to practice conversation, yes, maybe, but you could make progress by yourself just by listening YouTube and videos, and you know how to do that. You have done that, and you're a teacher. You know what the methods you could use to acquire a language, to learn a language. But it could be easier if you had someone guiding you, someone who's there for you, who cares. So I think it is a good component to bring to the table. I learned that language today.
I think that is essential. As I said, I don't think people come for an expert on the topic. They come for someone who can teach them, but also make them feel good about themselves. People come to classes for an experience. One thing I will say, though, on the technical side, you know my obsession with pronunciation and accents, and that's my specialization. Talking about bridging the gap and what we can bring to the table. If you look at language as 3 elements, meaning, form, and pronunciation. Form is something that students, so the technical names, right? Present perfect, present simple, whatever. That's something that students can do on their own. And trust me, they probably know it better than you, because many students have learned through the grammar approach. Your added value comes in conveying the difference in meaning. For example, this stuck with me actually, and I talked about it with one of my students yesterday, my Brazilian student. Last week, you taught me that to say do interior doesn't necessarily mean that they come from the interior part of Brazil, but it could also be from the coast, right? Because interior means not from the city. And that was added value in terms of meaning that I probably wouldn't have got to myself. So that's what I mean by you helped clarify the meaning for me. And then the other added value is pronunciation. And this is something, this I think is probably my technical strength and why a lot of students come back. It's because many teachers shy away from pronunciation because they don't know how to teach it and they're afraid of it. When students live for that stuff. Students, there's two things. If I have to talk from a technical perspective, there's two things that I think are winning components that I've seen are missing in many lessons. Focus on pronunciation, focus on error correction. Mm-hmm. I do so much error correction in a tactical way. Like I'm not just like bash, bash, bash after every sentence. I don't interrupt people after every sentence. I let them get to the end of their sentence and then I write things down. I have things for you too. And no, but it's like, because you don't want to interrupt people constantly because you want them to be able to become fluent and confident. Because there's two aspects, right? There's fluency, the ability to speak at length, and accuracy, the ability to be precise. And a good speaker has a combination of both those skills. So you want to let them develop that confidence, because if you interrupt people continuously, it's really hard to get them to speak again. They'll just clam up. But also you want to be focusing on accuracy. So dedicating a part of your lesson to say, hey, by the way, it's not X, it's Y. And getting, and rather than saying it's just this and that's it, asking them, why is it this? Reflect on it. Why is it the present simple and not the present perfect here? That develops more autonomy, more independence, and it makes you look good because they will have left that lesson and they'll be like, oh, okay, like this is something I need to work on. That's where our added value is in working on pronunciation, particularly meaning and error correction. I can't stress this enough. And I don't know why people don't embrace error correction and pronunciation. Well, I do, but I think they should work on that.
I do too. I do too. Wow, our time is up, and I feel like I could talk to you about that, and we have in the past. I think our conversations revolves around teaching so much. We touch upon topics every now and then, other topics, but we are both passionate about teaching and learning. So I feel like we could have a beer or a glass of wine and talk about teaching. Yes. So I wanted to say thank you.
My pleasure.
For having this conversation with me. It meant a lot to me.
No, bless. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and then you can, if you want to send, you said you make some notes. If you want to do them now or later, send me. Yeah?
Okay. Yes, perfect.
Okay. So you send me.
I'll send you them.
Thank you, actually. And I hope you have a lovely week and we'll talk soon.
Okay, take care.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye.